Can you hear me now? Danielle is typing.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that. Didn't have my microphone on apparently. This cadaver table does have a speaker, but it doesn't have a microphone.
Yep.
And I'm recording this for Camtasia, on Camtasia. All right, so you can see the heart on the side and you can see the blood vessels. One thing that this shows is blood flow, which is kind of cool. No, it's this one, I think. Let's do this one. So touch a blood vessel, any blood vessel on here. It will show the direction of blood flow. And then if I touch this again, it highlights the entire vessel and the branches that are coming into it. And if you touch it again, it names them all.
Oh, wow.
All right, so touch another one. Touch one right then. There we go. Okay, I touch it again, and it shows all the, oh, it went right to the label thing. So this is the cephalic. This is down the arm. And it goes up and meets the, up to the superior vein cava. It must dump into the subclavian and axillary. Axillary is one of the words that is on your list. It means armpit.
Okay.
Okay. So you guys in AMP1 have the body regional terms in that first lab.
Mm-hmm.
And brachial is upper arm, antebrachial is forearm, axillary is your armpit, and your shoulder is acromial. Okay, and so some of the blood vessels have some of those names. Brachiocephalic, that is coming from the arm, and the cephalic is another name for head. So the brachiocephalic vein is draining from the head, the jugulars dump into it, and the subclavian veins dump into it, which came from, subclavian goes under your clavicle, clavicle, axillary, brachial, down to, and then ulnar and radial. So that's kind of cool to see actual blood flow. All right, let's turn that one off. And we will turn him back to anatomical position, back to the right size. But we're going to move him down. I'm going to expand him. And if you guys are at home watching, you can also, if you join these by teams on your phone, you can expand on your phone too. So it actually will work if you ever want to join one of these meetings on Teams via your phone. Okay, so
ventricle.
If we click that, that is the right ventricle, and over
Ventricle.
here is the left ventricle. The heart is tipped down. It's not straight up and down in the human body, right and left. It's actually tipped like this, and your right lung is actually quite a bit bigger than your left because your heart's kind of pushed over on the left side. And when you guys get to nursing school, they tell you to put the stethoscope at the apex of the heart. That's that point right there between the fifth and sixth rib, because that's where the strongest beat is, and you'll be able to hear it the best there. And they'll teach you how to do that. But what you're doing is putting it the tip of the left ventricle. When the heart beats, the right ventricle shoots blood to the lungs. The left ventricle shoots blood to the body. So guess which one's stronger?
One to the body, because it has to go all the way down to the feet, all the way up to the head and everywhere else.
Exactly. And so if we cut this open, and if we do that, we take our clipping tool and we click on it. If we cut right here, whichever side I touch is going to disappear. Okay, so now we're going to tip him up. And you can look at the thickness of the walls.
Ventricle.
Okay, there's the right ventricle, and there's the left. And if you look at the thickness, actually twice as thick. The left ventricle is usually, when we cut pig hearts, they're like 1.5 inches thick and only 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch thick on the right side. And you don't want the heart too strong on the right side, because if you shoot blood too fast to the lungs, it'll push that fluid into the air sacs, otherwise known as drowning. Because you don't want fluid in your air sacs, you want air in your air sacs, right? And so some people, if they're high blood pressure, can cause more fluid in the lungs. That's one of the downsides. If your left ventricle isn't strong enough to pump blood out, fluid backs up into the lungs. That is congestive heart failure, is when your left ventricle weakens and blood isn't pushed out when it contracts or when it should be, and it gets backed up into the lungs. You actually die of pneumonia or fluid in the lungs more often than the heart problem. The heart, person just ends up having pneumonia or that kind of stuff all the time. And nowadays, you don't want to catch some of that stuff because they're antibiotic resistant, bacteria, or a person is just too weak because they're old. Anyway, you can see that the blood in here is red and blue. Blue indicates no oxygen, red with oxygen. So blue blood is going to the lungs, because that's the whole purpose, right? The lungs get oxygen. And red blood is going to the body. It's been oxygenated. And people tend to memorize the circulation through the heart, right ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle, lungs, left atrium, left ventricle, body. You don't think about the fact that in the heart, blood is going both ways at the same time. The right ventricle is shooting to the lungs and the left ventricle is shooting to the body at the same time. So it's a double circulation. It's just hard to write that down.
Yeah, it's not like one's going in and the other coming in. And it's not a stroke engine, it's a four-stroke engine.
Correct, exactly.
Bad analogy, probably.
Yeah. So, another thing, I don't know if you can see the valves. They can stop the heart from beating.
It's going to die.
Yeah. You can see now.
Esophagus.
That's the esophagus, obviously. Or where the esophagus would be behind the heart.
Intercostal
I
vein.
don't know if you can see valves very well. Let's get rid of those. But the valves open and close so that the blood in the right atrium, there's blood in the right atria that falls into the right ventricle. And then when the heart contracts, it shoots out the pulmonary artery to the lungs. You do not want it to shoot back up into the right atrium. And from the left side, you don't want to shoot it back up into the left atrium. So there's valves that prevent backflow. And when those valves shut, that's the lub sound. And then there's valves in the aorta and the pulmonary artery that shut when the ventricles are filling. And that's the dub sound. Lub dub, lub dub is what you're hearing, is those valves closing when you hear the heart sounds. Okay.
Aortic arch.
This is the aortic arch. I color that green, you can kind of see, because the blood shoots out of the left, and there's an arch, and of course it goes down behind, right?
Esophagus. Esophagus.
Right there.
Descending aorta.
The descending aorta. And it's called sometimes the thoracic aorta because it's in the thoracic cavity. Every time a blood vessel goes through a major body wall or splits, it gets a new name.
Of course it does.
Of course it does, because, what would we have A&P students be tortured by if we didn't have you, because essentially it's a great big circle, right?
Yeah.
It's all the same vessel, but yeah, they have to have different names. And as soon as it passes through the abdominal or the diaphragm into the abdominal cavity, it's called the abdominal aorta. And then it splits into the right and left common iliac, because iliac is,
Pelvis.
yeah, your shoulders. And yeah, anyway, that is a pretty big vessel. Let's see how big that is. An aortic aneurysm, if that were to burst, unless you were sitting on a hospital operating room and the doctor was there while it burst, you'd bleed out in seconds, because every time your heart beats, you're squirting out, a couple of heartbeats, your blood is toast. Isn't that Marfan syndrome, when, they die real suddenly because they have a weak aorta and people don't know they have it, and it bursts. And this kid in my high school, that's what he died from. And he was playing basketball, and he had won the game, and he called his mom, was talking to her, and he fell down and died. And he figured out he had Marfan syndrome. He had an aortic aneurysm, and that's the point it burst. and it was
Sad.
horrific.
Yes.
But you can see it's a pretty big vessel. Okay, and if you go behind, you can see there it goes right behind the heart. All right, let's see if we can.
And that's
plug it
one that's
back
carrying
together.
oxygenated blood down to the lower part of the body.
Right. All right, let's put him back in position, but we'll turn him over so you can see how big that vessel is. Now, if you take away
Mesentery.
the mesentery, you can see it's going all the way down, and that's where it splits. Okay? And the spinal cord, obviously there would normally be bones there. So the aorta is on the inside of the spinal cord, so it's protected a little bit. It's also pretty rigid. The vena cava,
Intercostal arteries. Pancreas. Duodenum. Spinal cord.
Is that the one that's
Let's
coming back up? Is that the big
let's
guy
take
coming
the
back up?
spinal cord
aquana.
out of here. Yes, the vena cava
Duodenum.
brings blood back up.
Duodenum. Inferior vena cava.
Very vena cava. Let's color that one without pink. Okay, that's actually bigger because there's a lot more pressure in arteries than there are in veins. So at any given time, there's more blood in your veins because they're more relaxed. That one will collapse when you die. This one will stay rigid. So when we got real cadavers, the arteries were still tubes. But the vena cava, because it doesn't have as much it doesn't need as much connective tissue because there's not as much pressure.
Yeah.
It would just collapse. The vena cava, ironically, is what was severed, broken, burst, and Princess died when she was in that car accident. When she was hit by a taxi or the taxi hit her or whatever, and she bled out internally. And they tried for like an hour and a half to put blood into her. But again, it's just as bigger than the aorta. You sever your vena cava,
Right.
you bleed out really fast and die. I mean, there's no bringing her back from that. Because you can see how big that vessel is. Veins tend to be closer to the surface, and our arteries are deeper because if they were to get cut, severed, broken, you bleed out faster because there's more pressure than a vein. Not that you wouldn't want to put a tourniquet around, the femoral vein if you burst that, but the femoral artery, that was pretty serious. You would want to stop that blood flow pretty quick. How are you guys at home doing? You guys okay? Danielle and Casa is here. I'll write this down because you guys get points for doing this. So we already have 10 points for the class. I hope that that's clear on Canvas. The case between the case histories and the virtual cadaver sessions, you need to do 6 over the semester. You can
6 of these.
you have to do at least 1 virtual cadaver.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you can do 6 virtual cadavers, or you can do 1 virtual cadaver and 5 case histories, or any combination of them. And every time I do one of these, I'm going to record it and I will post it. So if you come, you don't have to do anything. But if you can't come to them, you can do a summary. You watch it yourself after. It takes me a couple days to get the recording up to YouTube and then post it. But you could write a summary on one that has already been done. I have 2 posted in AMP1 already. And the very first one is just a short introduction to the 4 different cadavers. We have 2 females and 2 males, and I picked this one today because I wanted to show some of the, well, he's got awesome muscles. And it's really easy to see his muscles. So we did that first, and then I can show you some of the basic stuff and some of the directional terms I wanted to do for AMP1. I also want to do a little bit of the heart because, I don't know, Danielle, you're in AMP2, aren't you? I think she's in AMP2, and goal 1 was the endocrine system. Goal 2 for AMP2 is cardiovascular. And last week, when I did the recording, I did a little bit about the endocrine. And I'll try to kind of do it by topic a little bit, but you're welcome to come to any of them. It's fun to have people here and ask questions. It's easier for me. Or if you can talk on Teams. You don't have to just chat, ladies.
Well, I'm hoping they can hear us and we can hear them. That's the...
Yeah, if they talked, we would be able to hear them. This computer doesn't, $90,000 machine, and they didn't give us a speaker. This blows my mind.
Cool.
Anyway, do you guys have any other questions? I can go back to preset number 9, I think. And there he is. Normal. You can take layers out like we have been doing, put them all back together. They'd all come covered up.
So what's the, so the first, so starting Monday, because that's when we start our Tuesday, right? What should we focus in on this for what we need to know for the first week? Does that make sense?
Is body regional terms and directional terms.
Okay.
And hopefully you learned a few of them today, but all of the diagrams in the lab book, make sure there's a master list in AP 1 and 2, and all the instructors have to teach that. So anything on that list is fair game for a lab quiz or test.
Okay.
There is a lesson each time. I use a program called Soft Chalk, and it's like an interactive, you read stuff, and then there's a little game or an interactive thing. I copied the text. So you can get a copy of the textbook. I use a free OER, OpenStax anatomy book. If you want the real thing, you can go to OpenStax. There's a link in Canvas to do that. It's $52 if you want Amazon to print it out. It's like this thick. But I took my chapter and put them into Word and shrunk it down to just kind of what we do in A&P 1, because it's probably a 400 level textbook. And I took it down to our 200 level. But then I embedded that in Soft Chalk and made some activities.
Okay.
So it says step 1, step 2, step 3 in the modules. And step 1 is listen to my recordings. Listen to the lecture, print out the outline, and take notes like you would in class. And then read. Often, teachers just would love it if you all came to class fully read and understanding everything. If you don't understand A&P, or this is the first time you've taken it, and maybe this wouldn't pertain to you, Burden, because you have done some of this before, it's like reading Greek. It doesn't make any sense. So listen to the lectures, and then you can kind of skim read. Oh, I understand that. And you can just kind of, because, not a lot of people like to read. In the Word document, you can have it read to you. So you can listen to it on your way to work if you wanted to have it that way. And then step 3 is the labs. And after you've listened to the lecture and seen the PowerPoints, and now you've seen this, hopefully when you get there, sagittal, frontal, and transverse cuts, and superior up and inferior down, some of those words are now, oh yeah, they're familiar. And there's a little Play-Doh activity, and which is worth 5 points. And then study. There's a review test or review Quizlets I've made for every single goal if you want to, if that's something that you like. If you don't, make flashcards or do what works for you. Everybody's kind of got their own way, and then you take the test. The first test, the first 3 tests actually include lecture and lab material both. After that, there's a separate lab and lecture test. Because there's for the bones, there's a lab test, and then there's a lecture test on the physiology part.
Okay.
But the first part, there'll be questions like, if you're going from your femoral region to your pedal region, which direction are you moving?
Well, pedal is moving, so that'd be, you'd be moving, which would be,
Inferior, exactly. Femoral is here, pedal is foot, so you got to know those 2 words, and then you have to know which direction that is.
When you step on the pedal, except
That's right, pedal, pedestrian, it comes from that. Plantar is the bottom of your feet, because that's where you get plantar warts.
fasciitis.
That's right. Carpal is wrist, so think of all the words you know, and then there won't be, this one, the chin is mental, which, except sometimes when people think, they'll do like this.
well, does it also correlate with your mandible or somewhere in there, like your jawbone?
Yeah, because this is your mandible, exactly. So some of the words maybe you haven't heard before, but I'm thinking probably 90% of them that are in your vocabulary, you just might not know it. But you have to know the parts in order to know the direction.
Superior, inferior.
Right, and posterior towards the back, anterior towards the front. There's 10 words. It's way easier to learn it as 5 pairs. Superior, inferior, anterior, posterior, medial towards the middle, lateral towards the outside, superficial towards the surface, deep, internal, and then proximal and distal. Proximal is closer to the attachment point, distal is further away. So your arm, okay, your elbow is more distal than your brachial region.
Okay.
Because it's further from the attachment point.
Gotcha. But then when you get down to here, your next attachment point is actually your wrist. Is that right? Or no? Not
It's
your wrist,
actually,
but I mean,
as you go.
attachment to the body, to the
Yes,
trunk, to the
to the
core.
trunk, yep,
Okay.
So would that be just like the body region?
yes. Uh, axial skeleton is
Privacy cloth.
not your arms and legs.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
And that's like the first part of the test. And test or take on your own time, right?
right, the tests are timed, but there is no, I can't keep you from using your books and notes. Now, you're not gonna have time to look everything up.
Right.
So study like you would a normal test, but have your notes organized, have your diagrams right in front of you. I mean, duh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to think that you're all, memorizing this stuff, but the tests are timed to the point where I don't think you can look everything up. However, none of the lecture tests, you're never going to have to write anything. They're all multiple choice, true and false. Now, some of the lab tests, which are not timed, will have essay questions or have you explain something to me.
Like I remember one of them was explaining the process of muscles and the rotating off and
Yes,
it's like muscle contraction, how it happened.
what happened exactly. But that doesn't have, I mean, most of AP1 is pure memorization. Because
AP2 will be more
AP2 is much more physiology and applied. But you're going to get that towards the end, the muscle contraction of the nervous system especially. AP1 tends to get a little harder as you go along because things start to get more complicated. AP2 tends to get a little easier. The first two goals, endocrine and cardiovascular, are the hardest.
Okay.
They're the most difficult. So get started as soon as you can. There's no time to procrastinate in the summer class because
Yeah.
it's so fast.
Right. And then everything is due by like Friday or Saturday or when's it due by?
They're generally about a week. In AMP1, I think you have a week for the first goal.
For
Or
each
five. But goals 4 and 5 are super short, and 6, 7, and 8 are a little bit longer.
Okay. So like I said,
So-
my Friday is.
You'll always have a Friday for each goal.
Okay.
I think you'll have plenty of time
Okay.
to do that. And if you ever need an extension or need an extra day, if you let me know, I'm like, I don't care. It's fine. I know life happens. Or like, Michelle, can I have an extra 24 hours? I couldn't, or my computer is not working. That's totally fine. Just email me, and when you take it, then I'll remove because it automatically Canvas will do 10% per day for late work. But late is better than a 0. It's true because it's based on points. And everybody's got to balance that. I've had students like, I want to get an A, I want to get an A, and I'm like, you can get an A in this class. People get A's in this class. I said, but if you're, spending 23 and a half hours a day on this class to get an A, you got to decide there's a little balance in life that maybe an A- might be worth an extra hour of sleep or with your kids or whatever is important. So everybody's got to find that. And I understand. that has to happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, and again, I will have these different times during the semester to try to hit different people's schedules. You're welcome to come back in person or join on Teams or do the summary after.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.